My friends, picture a priest at the altar, not one radiant with strength, but weary, bowed low, with garments damp not from rain but from ceaseless dripping. It is a strange image, perhaps even uncomfortable, for who among us wishes to think of sacred duty in such terms? Yet the truth is often wrapped in paradox. Anointing flows, it is never manufactured. This truth is both humbling and liberating, because it reminds us that the deepest power of our calling cannot be produced by sheer willpower or polished performance. In a world obsessed with technique, with strategies and formulas, there is something uncomfortable in admitting that the most essential element cannot be taught, bottled, or controlled. Yet it is precisely this uncontrollable nature that makes the anointing genuine. The spring does not strain to release water. It flows because it is connected to the hidden reservoirs beneath the earth. So too with your life, the measure of your effectiveness lies not in the effort to appear powerful, but in your connection to the source who gives power without measure. Many attempt to manufacture what only heaven can release. They mistake charisma for calling, applause for anointing, and cleverness for authority. But the counterfeit always reveals itself because what is man-made carries the weight of maintenance. You must keep feeding the performance if you want it to last. True anointing, however, does not depend on your striving. It comes quietly, sometimes unexpectedly, and it lingers not because of your talent, but because of your surrender. A lamp does not generate the oil it burns. It merely holds the oil and offers itself as a vessel. Your task is not to force the flame, but to remain filled. This is why so many burn out while chasing the vision of their calling. They treat their gifts like machines that must constantly produce, forgetting that no machine can manufacture anointing. Machines may create noise, they may impress with motion, but they cannot produce living water. The human soul was never designed to be a factory of spiritual power. It was meant to be a channel. What flows through you does not originate in you. It is borrowed, given, entrusted for the sake of others. The moment you begin to think it originates from your genius or discipline alone, you cut yourself off from the stream and start sipping from a dry well. And yet there is discipline in this mystery. To say that anointing cannot be manufactured is not to say it comes without preparation. A field cannot make the rain fall, but it can be plowed, cleared, and ready to receive. So too with your calling. You cannot demand the anointing, but you can prepare your heart, your habits, your motives. You can keep your vessel clean, your soil soft, your lamp trimmed. When the oil comes, when the drops fall, when the flow begins, you are ready not because you forced it, but because you remained faithful in waiting. Consider how water flows downhill. It does not argue. It does not pretend to know its own course. It simply yields to gravity. The anointing works in much the same way. It rests upon those who yield. The proud, who try to climb upward by their own brilliance, find the flow bypassing them. The humble, who make themselves channels instead of mountains, discover the stream running through their very being. You cannot trick it, you cannot stage it, you cannot replicate it, but you can receive it, and in receiving, you begin to overflow. When you understand that anointing flows, you stop competing with others. Rivers do not argue about which one is more authentic. Each flows according to its own path. So too with your calling. It is not your task to compare the measure of your flow with another's, but to remain faithful to the current entrusted to you. A drop from heaven is worth more than a bucket from the marketplace. Better to drip with what is pure than to drown in what is fabricated. The most powerful lives are not those who shouted the loudest or performed the greatest feats of strength, but those who allowed themselves to be vessels of what only God could give. The dripping priest is not impressive. By human standards his garments are stained. His form is worn. His pace is slow. But the drops testify to something greater. He has stood beneath the source long enough to be marked by it. And so it is with you. Your calling will never be unlocked by striving to produce what was never yours to begin with. It will be unlocked when you yield, when you remain beneath the flow, when you embrace the truth that anointing cannot be manufactured. It flows, quietly, steadily, and undeniably from the one who called you. Dripping is evidence of abiding, not of effort. The sight of a steady drip may seem small, unremarkable, even irritating to the hurried eye. Yet in its quiet rhythm lies a profound truth. It is not the exertion of the vessel that produces the drip, but its nearness to the source. The dripping priest is not powerful because of his strain, nor radiant because of his labor. He is simply one who has remained in the presence long enough to be saturated. His dripping is not the fruit of his striving, but the testimony of his abiding. This truth pushes against the grain of our modern thinking. We are conditioned to measure value in sweat and strain, to believe that only the frantic can be fruitful. We glorify the grinding, the endless proving, the exhausting pursuit of significance. Yet the kingdom works on a different economy. In the realm of the spirit, the evidence of true connection is not the noise of frantic motion, but the quiet consistency of overflow. The dripping priest teaches us that transformation does not come from endless performance, but from prolonged presence. It is what lingers in you after you have stood near the eternal flame that drips into the world around you. When you abide, the dripping becomes inevitable. You do not need to advertise it, to announce it, or to pretend it is greater than it is. People notice, even if you do not. They see in your words a weight beyond mere vocabulary. They feel in your actions a depth that cannot be faked. They sense in your presence a residue of something otherworldly. This is the power of dripping. It is quiet, subtle, and yet undeniable. A tree rooted by living waters does not force its fruit. It bears naturally, season after season, not because of effort, but because of its connection to the source. Yet there is a hidden challenge here. Abiding is far more difficult than effort. Anyone can strive for a short season, but few can remain, unmoved by distraction, steady in devotion. Effort is noisy, measurable, and praised. Abiding, however, is slow, silent, often unseen. It asks for patience in a culture addicted to speed. It demands stillness in a world that worships motion. To abide is to resist the temptation to prove your worth through exhaustion, and instead trust that the unseen connection will bear visible fruit in its time. The drip is not the product of trying harder, it is the evidence that you did not leave the well. Consider the difference between a bucket and a spring. A bucket can be filled by effort lowered, raised, carried, emptied, and filled again. But a spring flows without ceasing, not by labor but by source. Many live like buckets, constantly draining themselves through frantic work, constantly returning to refill, wondering why they always feel empty. The dripping priest lives like a spring, not because he is better, but because he abides. His secret is not more exhausting effort, but deeper dwelling in the one who never runs dry. The beauty of dripping is its consistency. A torrent may impress for a moment, but it often fades just as quickly. Dripping, though small, wears away stone with time. It shapes landscapes not by force, but by faithfulness. Your life, too, will shape the world not through occasional bursts of effort, but through steady drops of obedience, day after day, year after year. What seems small now will carve deep channels for generations to come. Do not despise the drip. Do not look for fireworks when faithfulness will do. The dripping is enough, because it reveals something deeper than talent. It reveals that you have remained. It is proof that you have not run off chasing every glittering distraction. It is the mark that you have stood long enough in the presence of the source for his essence to cling to you. The world may overlook it, but heaven does not. Every drop is a testimony that you chose to abide. The truth is simple yet sobering. Effort without abiding leads to dryness. Abiding without effort always leads to overflow. If you must choose, choose to abide, for the drip that flows from abiding will outlast every frantic performance. To drip is to remain is to live connected, and to live connected is to unlock the slow, steady, unstoppable flow of the anointing that the world cannot counterfeit. Your calling marks others more than yourself. It is tempting to think that your purpose is mainly about your own fulfillment, your own sense of achievement, or the recognition you might gain from it. Yet calling is never self-contained. It is not a private treasure locked away in the chambers of your own heart. True calling, when anointed, always leaves traces on others. Like oil that drips from the head of the priest and stains his garments, it never stays where it begins. It spreads, it touches, it marks everything and everyone around it. The measure of your calling is not how satisfied you feel, but how transformed others become because of your presence. This is why genuine anointing cannot be faked. You may impress people with clever words or dazzle them with talent for a moment, but unless the residue of your calling remains with them after you are gone, what you carry is little more than performance. True calling lingers. It shows up in the way someone remembers your words long after they have left the room. It reveals itself when your kindness reshapes a life you did not even know was watching. The drops of your calling fall silently, but they do not fall in vain. We see this in the lives of those who carried divine purpose before us. Moses was not called for his own comfort. He was called to lead a nation out of bondage. Esther's anointing was not for her own survival. It was for the preservation of her people. Even Christ himself declared that he came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The pattern is clear. The anointing of your calling is not a crown you wear for your glory, but oil that pours through you to mark others with freedom, courage, and hope. Yet this truth can be uncomfortable. Many wish for a calling that elevates them, but not one that demands they pour out for others. But calling without sacrifice is an illusion. The dripping priest does not keep the oil for himself. It falls upon those near him, often unnoticed by him, but life-changing for them. So it will be with you. You may never fully know the extent of how your calling touches others. A word spoken in passing may become the seed of transformation in someone else's journey. A single act of faithfulness may ripple into generations you will never meet. You do not control the reach of your calling. You simply abide in it, and the drops fall where they are meant to fall. This is also why humility is essential. If your calling is truly for others, then pride has no place in it. To boast of your anointing is to misunderstand it, for the anointing was never yours to begin with. You are the vessel, not the source. You are the priest dripping with oil, but the oil itself belongs to God. When you realize this, you stop clutching at recognition. You do not need to chase applause or validation, because your task is not to measure the impact, but to remain faithful in letting it flow. There is freedom in this perspective. When you know your calling is meant to mark others, you are released from the crushing weight of trying to prove yourself. Your worth does not depend on visible success or human approval. Your task is simpler. Stand under the flow and let it drip. Trust that the drops are falling where they need to. Trust that the oil is staining lives in ways you may never see. Some of the greatest legacies are carried in silence, in unseen acts of obedience that ripple outward in invisible ways. At the end of your life, the true testimony of your calling will not be the titles you held or the achievements you collected. It will be the stories of others who were marked by your faithfulness. They will say, "Because he stood firm, I found courage. Because she obeyed, I discovered hope. Because they dripped with what was given to them, I was forever changed." That is the beauty of calling. It was never about you, yet it requires all of you. It will stretch you, cost you, and often go unnoticed by you, but its impact will be etched on countless lives beyond your own. So do not measure your calling by how much it fills you, but by how much it spills through you. Your anointing was always meant to mark others. Let it drip, let it flow, let it stain the world around you. And in doing so, you will discover that the deepest joy is not found in being fulfilled alone, but in becoming a vessel through which countless others are touched by the flow you carry. To be soaked is to surrender. There is no other way. The anointing of your calling is not given to the proud or the resistant, but to the one willing to be undone. To be soaked means you do not merely brush against the flow, taking a drop or two to appear touched. You step beneath it, allowing it to saturate every part of you until nothing remains untouched. Many want the fragrance of anointing without the inconvenience of being drenched. They want the glow without the surrender. But calling does not work that way. The oil will not rest lightly upon a guarded heart. It seeps, it penetrates, it demands entry into every corner of your being. And only those who are willing to yield fully are transformed by it. Surrender is uncomfortable because it means losing control. To be soaked is to let your pride wash away, to release your carefully managed image, to lay down your plans and admit that your strength is not enough. A damp garment can be dried quickly, but a soaked garment carries weight. It clings, it changes the way you walk. This is the picture of surrender. Once drenched, you cannot pretend to be as you were before. The anointing makes you heavy with purpose. It alters your steps, it slows your haste, it keeps you from running in your own direction. To carry the oil is to accept that you will never move quite the same again. And yet, this surrender is freedom. Many fight to maintain their independence, believing that control is strength. But in the spiritual life, the paradox is this: the more you surrender, the freer you become. When you are soaked, you no longer strive to impress or perform, because the oil itself speaks louder than your effort. You do not need to beg for validation. The fragrance of surrender carries its own authority. The dripping priest is not impressive by worldly standards, yet his very presence declares that he has been with the source. He is not dry, not untouched, not half-hearted. He is marked through and through. The danger is in resisting the soaking. Some step under the flow for a moment, but step back quickly, fearing what full surrender might cost them. They settle for being sprinkled rather than drenched. But a sprinkle fades, it dries, it can be forgotten. A life only lightly touched by calling soon reverts to ordinary ambition. But a soaked life cannot go back. Once the oil has permeated your soul, you are never the same. Your desires shift, your vision clears, your priorities reorder themselves. What once seemed urgent loses its grip, and what once seemed impossible becomes your very purpose. Surrender does not mean weakness, it means alignment. When the sponge surrenders to the water, it does not lose. It becomes filled. When the branch abides in the vine, it does not disappear. It bears fruit. In the same way, when you surrender to the anointing, you are not erased, you are fulfilled. The true self you were created to be only emerges when you yield. Holding back keeps you shallow, but yielding fully allows the depth of your calling to rise. To be soaked also means to carry the evidence of surrender wherever you go. A soaked garment leaves marks on what it touches. A soaked soul leaves imprints on the lives it encounters. You cannot hide it, nor should you try. The world is not transformed by those who keep their faith tidy and contained, but by those who are unashamed to drip wherever they walk. Your surrender will inconvenience you at times, but it will bless those around you. The weight you carry will slow your steps, but it will also steady them. The oil will cost you your pride, but it will give you authority that no human hand can bestow. So do not fear being drenched. Do not resist the soaking. Step fully beneath the flow, even if it ruins your old plans, even if it alters your walk, even if it stains the garments of your life. For it is only in surrender that your calling is unlocked. Only in surrender that the anointing flows freely. Only in surrender that you are truly free. To be soaked is to give up pretending you can control the oil. To be soaked is to admit you are not the source but the vessel. To be soaked is to surrender, and in that surrender you will discover the power, the authority, and the freedom of a life marked completely by the hand of God